All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, and I'm wishing you just the happiest day today. I hope that you're all having a great time. Hope that you all had a great weekend. I hope that if the Super Bowl is your thing, I hope that that was a lot of fun for you, that the food and the commercials and the game and the friends and everything, I hope that it was awesome, and I hope you had a great time. And if football is not your thing, as it's not my thing anymore, and certainly for all of our friends out there across the oceans from the U.S., it's probably not their thing so much. I hope that you found something really fun to do, and I hope that you didn't find yourself feeling like you were missing out on something, or that you were somehow, doing something so against the grain that it made you feel some kind of regret or shame or anything like that. Because that's really what we're talking about here with all these podcasts, is that, when we can approach things, even something as simple and as, or even something as big as the Super Bowl, right? We can do this with presence, right? We can say, well, I'm just enjoying what I'm doing right now, whether that's the Super Bowl or it's something else. But, a lot of times when these big things are happening, we feel compelled to take part, but accepting the fact that it's not for us, and accepting the fact that we're going to do something different, right? And having some compassion towards ourselves about that, and having compassion for all those other folks who are doing the thing that is opposite to what we think is the thing to do, right? Those, so for instance, if we are football fans and somebody says, no, I don't really want to watch the game, it doesn't do anything for me, right? A little compassion is what enables us to see that, it's okay that everybody doesn't want to do the same thing that I do all the time. And that, that's kind of what life is all about. And that the people who do want to watch the Super Bowl and the people who don't want to watch the Super Bowl, well, basically they're after the same thing. And that is a very simple, very, very simple thing that is they are looking for their happiness. Right? That is the ultimate truth, is that all of us just want to be free from whatever suffering is inhibiting us and blocking us from our happiness. And so compassion is what allows us to recognize this fact, recognize the fact that all anybody wants to do is to create the conditions for their own happiness. And if that means watching a football game, well, then that's beautiful. And if it means not watching a football game, that's beautiful too. Whatever opinions I might have about the football game, whatever views I might have about it, whatever, desires I might have of people, for whatever reason to watch or not watch, those things are quite, unrelated to the fact that each of us out there, those are things that are from me, right? Like my views, my, desires, my passions, right? But compassion is what lets me believe that my passions and my desires are not going to be shared by every single person. And in fact, somebody might want the exact opposite of what I want. But again, the key is that at the end of the day, that person and me, even though we want totally different, we're going at different means to the same end, right? Because what we both want is we both just want to be happy. And when we can kind of recognize this in ourselves and others, right, it explains all of the different, activities and behaviors that we see in people, right? And this even goes for parents with young children, right? When your young children are acting out in a way that you just don't find acceptable or okay in terms of behavior, it helps to remind ourselves that the children, just like us, they're just acting in a way that they feel is going to bring them happiness. And so then the last component, which is curiosity, right? I always talk about this. I talk about presence, acceptance, compassion, and curiosity. And curiosity is that thing that allows us to consider this other sort of vantage point, this other point of view that other people might have, including our own children, right? A lot of times we kind of forget about this. And curiosity is that thing that keeps us in that beginner's mind that we've talked about here, and keeps us staying open to the possibilities and to the potentials that other people might have. right? And so I hope beyond anything that today and over this past weekend that you were able to meet your experiences with a measure of presence, acceptance, compassion, and curiosity, because ultimately this is the formula. I mean, there's a couple other ingredients involved, but essentially if you can do these four things with any kind of regularity, then what you are doing is you are creating the conditions for your own happiness. And that's where you can get to the point, like I find myself quite frequently these days, is being happy for no reason at all, right? A lot of people think like, again, the Super Bowl is a great example of this, right? People think like, oh, this is going to be a great party. There's going to be great food. There's going to be great people. This is going to make me happy. Right? Like I'm going to be happy because it's Super Bowl Sunday. Well, but maybe your team loses. Maybe the wings aren't that tasty. Maybe something's wrong with the, they don't have the kind of beer that you like. And now all of a sudden, this thing that was supposed to make you very happy winds up making you very unhappy. So how can something make us both happy and unhappy at the same time, right? Logically, it doesn't make sense. And the reason for that, specifically with what we're talking about here, is that happiness doesn't come from outside like that. Happiness comes from inside, from the ability to be present, really rooted in this now moment, right? Being accepting of what it is that arises in this moment, right? Be accepting of the kind of beer that they have at a Super Bowl party. Be accepting of the fact that it's COVID-19 and apparently like some big advertisers aren't even making ads this year. Being accepting of the fact that maybe your team didn't get into the Super Bowl, but you can still have a good time watching it, right? So, and then of course, being compassionate, as I mentioned a few moments ago, right? When we're compassionate for ourselves and for others, what we do is we give people and ourselves a little room, a little leeway, right? A little forgiveness, a little patience, right? We don't get triggered by what other people are doing or what we are doing ourselves, because we recognize that really all we're after is happiness. And so anything that you're doing in the pursuit of happiness, as long as it's not hurting someone else, right? It's all good. And then it's all completely understandable, right? And then, of course, again, the curiosity is the openness to want to know what happens in this situation, right? And want to know, like, what happens if I apply presence, acceptance, and compassion? What happens if I treat somebody with compassion? How are they going to behave differently after that? So I hope that makes sense to you. And that's really essentially all that we're doing in all of these podcast episodes and all these YouTube videos and all the written messages that I send out. We're really just looking to do this, right? To get you to cultivate this essence, this sort of attitude of presence, acceptance, compassion, and curiosity. Because again, the result of that, right? If you create like a mathematical formula, right? Acceptance plus compassion plus presence plus curiosity equals happiness. And again, happiness for no reason at all. Just happiness just because you're happy. So, by the way, before we get into today, and so anyway, that's what we're doing here in all these episodes, right? And so all these concepts and little practices that I give you here and there are all geared just to do this. It really is that simple, folks. It really is. It's not complex at all. All right. And so before I get into what today's topic is, which we're going to take on that first context there, the context or the concept rather of the present moment, because it's something we throw around a lot, but I don't know how well it is understood. So we're going to get into that in just a second. But before we do, I want to thank you to everyone who has reached out and given me the comments about the sound of this podcast. Apparently, everybody's very happy with this latest modification of putting this nice fuzzy thing on this covering the microphone. Apparently, y'all did hear some noises and some pops and some distortion that was going on. So I'm hoping that at least from what I've heard, I'm so happy to know that it's working and that it's sounding good. And yeah, so I'm just so happy about that. But if you have anybody else has any comments or suggestions, I am all ears here. Okay. Again, I try not to go too far far away because I think then it starts getting a little bit too quiet, which was the whole point of getting this microphone. But I think if I get too close, it starts getting some of that distortion. So I'm trying to keep a regular and steady distance from the microphone of just a couple of inches. So let me know. Okay, keep those comments coming, and really not just about the microphone. I love to hear from you about anything. All right. I really, really do. So please, don't hesitate. If you think sometimes like, oh, I should write Art and tell him what I think about this, or maybe I have a question about something that he said in an episode 2 months ago, or maybe I have something I want him to talk about. I'm just waiting for him to come up with this particular thing. Or maybe in one of the episodes, you were sure that I was going to hit upon that thing that you thought, but I didn't. Okay, if any of that's going on, just reach out, just send a quick note. I love it, and I promise you, sometimes these little notes back and forth can evolve into really beautiful conversations. So please, if you're moved even a little bit to reach out, then do it. Okay, I would love to hear from you. All right, so the present moment. Right now, again, this is the first. The first thing that I say to everybody, right, is that it's all about presence, right? And there's lots of research that has shown that people are happy because they are present. It is not the other way around. Sometimes people imagine that. People imagine that, well, people are present because they're happy. But the research is unambiguous about this, okay? People are happy because they are present, right? There was actually a study done at Harvard University many years ago that, not many years ago, but a few years ago, where they use cell phone technology. And I know I've said this before. I'll take just a minute or two to describe it again. In cell phone technology, smartphone technology, I should say, thousands of people, many thousands of people signed up for this study, and each one of them every day would get random, at random times during the day, they would get a text on their smartphone, right? And the text said, okay, well, what are you doing right now? And there was, multiple choice things. You can find the closest thing that you were doing. And then it said, okay, now where is your mind right now? Is it on this thing that you're doing? Are you thinking about walking down the street? Are you thinking about washing the dishes? Or are you thinking about something different? Right? And then finally, what is your happiness level right now? How happy do you feel right now on a scale of 1 to 10 or whatever it was, right? And it's a well-designed research experiment. It was lauded by Daniel Goleman. He's quoted it quite a few times. Richie Davidson has quoted it. Dan Siegel has quoted it. So, I mean, these are three big minds in this field of mindfulness and neurobiology and everything, and they all love this experiment. So that's good enough for me, right? And what they found was that it was like 47% of people are not paying attention to what it is that they're doing in the present moment. Right? And as Richie Davidson will say, people, I'm convinced we can do better, right? Because what they find is that those 47% of the people who are not engaged in what they're doing, they were reporting being not happy. Right. And so the basic one of the things that came out of this study at Harvard was this great line that they basically titled this study, "A Wandering Mind is an Unhappy Mind." Right? And so this speaks to that first tenet that I talk about all the time, which is presence, right? Which is being here in the present moment. But again, what exactly does this mean? Right? It's very easy to say the present moment, and a lot of people, I mean, of course we get it as a concept, right? Like now is now, right? That's pretty simple. But how many of us really kind of understand that there really is like another way that we kind of talk about the present moment is to say that there is nothing else besides the present moment. And that's one that gets people a little scratching their heads. That's a little hard to kind of conceptualize. All right. So I'm going to go through something happened a couple of weeks ago. I was just, kind of dittering around my kitchen on a Saturday afternoon, taking it easy. I was making a cup of tea and so I was making this cup of tea, and it occurred to me that this was a great way to illustrate, the concept of the present moment. Now we're going to get back into what it means that there is only the present moment, okay? But first, let me just talk about the concept of now, okay? And this is what I discovered with my cup of tea, right? So there I am, pouring boiling water into a cup of tea, right? Into an empty cup with a tea bag in it, right? And of course, now I put the cover on the teacup, and we're going to let it steep for about 10 minutes or so, right? So in this moment that I'm pouring the water into the cup, right? I'm doing that now, right? This is now, right? Like there's no other time that I'm doing this. Is not something that I'm, time traveling to do. I'm pouring this water right now. Yeah. So then I put the cover on, and now I'm not focused on anything. So now maybe I kind of wander off and I do something, maybe I'm, kind of looking through social media for a couple of minutes. Maybe I'm having a conversation with one of my kids, or maybe I'm just, kind of cleaning up some stuff. Or, there's always cleaning to do when you have two kids at home. Whatever it is, right? Maybe I engage in a certain, process of some sort, some kind of activity, right? And now, what ironic choice of words, but as I'm doing this other thing now, right? I can't get away from the word now. when I'm doing this other thing, right? Whether it's again, washing some dishes or sweeping the floor or doing something, right? That is not a very, it's not an activity that requires a lot of my attention, right? Like when you're pouring a cup of tea, right? You're waiting for the water to boil. You have a signal that the water is boiling, and it's boiling now, right? Like this is happening right now. If I walk away from the water, I turn the heat off and walk away, it will no longer be boiling after a couple of minutes, right? So right now the water is boiling, and I'm right now pouring it into this cup, and I'm measuring how high the water is so I can put the cover on it. I'm carefully ripping the paper of the tea bag so that I don't, rip open the tea bag. I'm dunking it in there a couple of times to make sure everything's getting nice and soaked, and then I'm putting the cover on it, right? So all that stuff I was paying attention to doing. Yeah, I was engaged in that because it required some kind of thought. Right. And so now, though, maybe I pick up the broom and I start sweeping. Now, sweeping is not a very complicated, process, right? It's just, okay, there's the dirty floor. Here's the broom. I'm just going back and forth, put it all in one big pile, then get the dustpan and sweep it up and put it in the garbage. Yeah, I can do that, while doing anything else. I can be thinking about anything but sweeping the floor, and I will still sweep the floor very effectively. I don't need to focus on sweeping the floor. It's something I've done. To a certain degree, the same thing could be said about a cup of tea, but, maybe not quite. But sweeping the floor is something I've done so many hundreds of times in my life, thousands of times perhaps in my life. Even just in the last few years that I've been a parent, I've done it thousands of times. but the point is that it's something that I've done so many times that I don't need to even think about it, right? Now, there's a lot of things in our lives that are this way. In fact, 95% of the things that we do every day do fit this description. Driving our cars, eating our food, sweeping floors, brushing teeth, taking a shower, making a bed, on and on goes the list, right? Of things that we do not have to think about as we are doing them because we have done them so many times that it's just automatic. It's just, it happens mindlessly. Yeah, it just happens without our attention whatsoever. So now let's say, maybe I set a timer for my cup of tea, or maybe I just recognize that after I put the broom away, I recognize it's been about 10 minutes or so and my tea is probably ready now. Right? So now I can go back to my tea and say, now my tea is ready right now. And so there's this kind of idea where, now, when I was pouring the cup of tea, it was now. And when I'm drinking the cup of tea, it is now. But the thing is that while I was sweeping the floor, who knows where my mind went? My mind might have gone someplace far into the past. I was thinking about the first time I had an apartment and that I never swept the floor, or maybe I'm thinking sometime in the future to the point where my children are old enough where their chore will be to sweep the floor. right? I might be anywhere in my mind, but I'm reminded to come back to now because my tea is ready now. And now I will get to enjoy my tea, which was the whole point. Right. But the point that I'm trying to make is that at no point in time was now anything but now, right? While I was sweeping the floor or while I was brushing my teeth or while I was doing whatever it was that I was doing, I was still doing that now. And so mindfulness and its counterpart, heartfulness, that I'm going to explain how this works in just a minute. Mindfulness asks us to pay attention to now all the time, right? Not letting ourselves get off into someplace in the past or someplace into the future and then reminding ourselves, oh, my tea is ready. The timer just went off. It's time to come back to now, right? When we practice mindfulness, what we do is we practice paying attention to those things as we're doing them, or as moment to moment as things are arising in our lives, right? So that means that while brushing your teeth, you're paying attention to brushing your teeth. While making the bed, you're paying attention to making the bed. While sweeping the floor, you're paying attention. What is my body doing as I'm sweeping the floor? Is there a rhythm happening? Do I hear the sound? Like, what's the sound that's being made as I'm sweeping the floor? How does my body feel as I'm sweeping the floor? How do my emotions feel while I'm sweeping the floor? Am I a little upset that I'm the one sweeping the rice that's dried up from last night's dinner off the floor because nobody else in my home did it, right? Like what are the emotions going on as it's happening? And most importantly, what is happening with my thoughts as I'm sweeping the floor? Am I thinking about, that my son who always spills the rice and never picks up after himself, and how many times have I told him this, and all this times of pass, right? You see what I'm saying? So, or am I just, paying attention to the fact that I'm having these thoughts and having these emotions, because those are happening right now too. They might not be about right now, but they are happening right now. And if I'm paying attention to them, instead of getting lost in them, well, then I'm anchored in the now. And when I can be anchored in the now, when I can be present, then all I need to do then is accept what is happening, accept the fact that my son didn't clean up his rice again under the table. And it's not just him. I mean, I do it too. My wife, I don't mean to pick on my son, the poor dude. He's a good guy. But the, right. So the idea though is that, am I getting lost in the thoughts about my son and how I wish that he would clean up after himself more often? Or am I aware of the thoughts as they're happening, right? And acceptance is what's going to allow this to happen, right? Acceptance is going to allow me to let go and to not get stuck in the thoughts, like not get angry about the fact that there's rice under the table again and get all worked up about it, right? Acceptance allows me to just stay anchored in what is happening right now, which again is this, right? I'm sweeping. For you on the podcast, I'm doing this motion of sweeping on the video. I'm not a very good impersonation of somebody sweeping, by the way. And then, of course, compassion, right, allows me to know that my son, help, So here's the thing, right? Acceptance facilitates presence. Compassion facilitates acceptance, and then curiosity facilitates compassion. So you see how all these things work in a tandem, right? And they go in a cycle too, right? Because again, it's about constantly reminding ourselves, right? It's about constantly reminding ourselves that okay, I'm sweeping the floor. I should pay attention to sweeping the floor right now. Because the bottom line is, right, and I know we're kind of getting tight on time here, so I'm just going to jump into what I mean by the present moment, or what I mean by saying that there is no other moment except the present moment, right? Because this is the only thing that is real. Right? As I said before, right, we don't notice now become then. Right? We never noticed that moment, right, where now became then somehow. right? Or we don't notice when then becomes now, right? And that's because then is a construct. Okay, then if we're talking about the future, then, right? When finally I get this thing happening, then I will finally be happy, right? That future then is not really a then. It's an imagination. It's a construct of our imagination that someday this thing might happen that will, make me happy. But that thing that I'm envisioning, right? That thing about the future, about being happy at some point in the future, what I'm really describing is some point where the present moment is going to be happy. Again, you don't notice when now becomes then, because it doesn't. Now is always now. And we could do the same thing looking backwards, right? Except that in the backwards time, it's not a construct of our imagination, although some of it is, but it's really a construct of our memory. Right? Which memory experts, by the way, neuroscientists and people who, neuroanatomists who know how the brain processes memories, right, will tell you that memory is not what we think it is, right? We have this sense of like memories are this real thing that exists somewhere in our mind, that we can somehow go to like a drive directory and pull up this, okay, that's the memory I'm looking for. Let me double click on it and I will open up to an actual 100% accurate photograph of something that happened in my past. That's not how memory works at all, right? When you recall a memory, you're recalling it as per what you're going through now, right? The memory that you recall of some time then is going to be colored by everything that is happening now. And so therefore, there is no reality when the future is not a reality and the past is not a reality. And as Eckhart Tolle puts it, right, nothing will ever happen to you in the future and nothing ever has happened to you in the past. Everything that will ever happen in your life and everything that ever has happened in your life has happened and will happen in the present moment. Because again, there is no other. Okay? Everything else is just a construct of the mind. That's why this practice works so well. Okay? Because when we cultivate the skill of being able to ground ourselves in this present moment, which means not to get lost in the mechanism of the mind, which wants to pull us into thinking about the future and wants to push us into thinking about the past and try to resolve these things, right? Try to have hope for the future or have some sort of closure on the past. Right? That's what our minds want to do. But when we do that, we open ourselves up to lots of big emotions that are going to be, remember the scale of human emotions, right? There's a division there. Everything on the negative side of the scale, which is not to say bad emotions. There's no such thing as bad emotions, but there are negative emotions in the sense that they are repelling us from things. And they are doing that because they are rooted in fear. And anytime your brain recognizes or senses that you are in a state of fear, it is going to initiate the stress response. And from that stress response, that's where fear, evolves into, grief or shame or anger or resentment, right? And once we start feeling that, now, guess what? We're no longer now, we're in a then. But this then doesn't really exist, right? And so when we practice over and over, bringing ourselves to now, reminding ourselves, I am doing a podcast right now. I am speaking into a webcam, into a microphone. Right? I am not thinking about who's going to listen to this. Is anybody going to listen? What kind of comments am I going to get? Is this going to be embarrassing? Are people going to really, is this the one that destroys my reputation? Right? Like, right? Like that's the way we tend to think. But now if I think about all that stuff, what am I doing now in the podcast? I don't know what I was going to say. I better start over. I can't do this. Right? Well, the same thing happens with our lives, right? Like while I'm sweeping the floor, floor, I'm thinking, one thought about my son not cleaning up his rice, and then another thought about how many times I've talked to him, and now another thought about how he never listens to me about anything, and then another thought about all those toys that I bought him all these times, and now all of a sudden I'm in this place of anger and moving towards rage at that point. Yeah? And guess what happens, right? Then my son or my daughter walk into the room and say, "Hey, Dad, can you help me with this?" And guess what? Right? Of course, now I'm going to try. I'm going to try to keep myself as low key as I can, but it's impossible, right? When my son or daughter comes into that room and says, "Hey, Dad, can you help me with this?" But I'm all caught up in this imaginary thing that I've been running through in my mind. Well, now I can't be there with them, right? I can't give them 100% of my presence. I can't give them 100% of my attention. And therefore, there's going to be, consequences of that, right? We're going to grow a little further apart. Maybe there's a little fracturing happening to our relationship. And these things, again, fast forward 20 years to a now, 20 years from now, and what does my relationship look like with my son and my daughter because of all of these individual moments, these present moment opportunities that I had that I did not, take advantage of, and I did not allow myself to be present with them. What does my relationship look like? What does my emotions look like around the relationship? And again, it becomes a vicious cycle. It can be either a vicious cycle or a virtuous cycle, right? Because the more we do pay attention to as it's happening, right? As the more we pay attention to now, the more that it's just, again, every moment that I have with my kids is a now moment. Right? I'm not putting something on hold in the service of then. I'm living now. And therefore, every moment becomes an opportunity for me to cultivate and strengthen my relationship with my kids. And of course, this applies to your spouse, your friends, your job, your parents, your commitment to doing good things in the world, whatever it is. Right? The same thing applies, the same principle, that when we attend to this present moment, then every single moment is an opportunity to course correct and keep, nurturing this thing that we really want to be. This relationship, this worker, this artist, this citizen of the world, this activist, whatever it is, right? Each moment is an opportunity for you to attend to that thing that you're trying to do. And that is how there is never another moment except this present moment. I hope you all found that interesting. I hope that you find it helpful too. Again, this was, an idea that I had the other day, a couple of weeks ago. Sometimes I, on a Saturday afternoon or whatever, I'll be doing chores and I'll say, "Oh, that's a good thing to talk about on the podcast. Let me make a note of that." And then, but of course I don't have an opening for 2 weeks. So, it's like, it's a little old at this point in my mind. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it helpful. And by all means, if you have any questions about it at all, I want you to reach out, okay? Because this is not something that's intuitive, right? Remember, our whole lives are structured around this preparation for then, as opposed to living in now, right? This happens in our schooling. This happens in our bills. This happens in our mortgages. It's kind of a product of our society. So it might be true that this doesn't make sense to you somehow. And if that's the case, then let's get into a conversation, because as I say, presence is where this all begins. And that is the very, very heart of all of the practices that I talk about. So if you want to get to the point of being happy for no reason at all, presence is something that we got to start with. And it has to start with understanding. So if you have any questions, I'm begging you to reach out to me. All right. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the difference between fear and the awareness of danger, and how fear is something that is not present, whereas the awareness of danger is present. And we're going to explain that tomorrow. So I'm really looking forward to that. So Again, folks, if you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to reach out. I would love to hear from you anyway, but certainly I want to make sure you understand all of this. All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I wish you well. Take off my crooked looking glasses because of this weird webcam. And I swear they're not that crooked. When I go into the mirror, I don't know what this is. I do know what it is, but I'm not, I don't have the capacity to really kind of figure it out. But anyway, here I am, no glasses, wishing you well, hoping you have a great day, hoping that the rest of the day that these words have inspired you to really ground yourself in the present, right? And anytime I did mention that and I know we're late now, but one more point, right? Compassion is presence, right? Because when you're considering the suffering of another, right, and you're considering the alleviation of that suffering, when you're considering an action that can be taken or a thought or an attitude that can be had to want for the end of that suffering, that is something that you're doing right now. All right, so that's just one of many different ways that you can practice presence. And if you need some ideas on how to get into this formally and informally, I am here to help you. All right, everybody. Thanks again for watching. Thanks again for listening. I wish you well. I'll be back again tomorrow. Take care, everybody.